Concerns over U.S. plans for Greenland continue to mount in Europe. A report in the Wall Street Journal suggests that U.S. President Donald Trump's preferred option is to buy the autonomous territory from Denmark. But the White House has also issued a statement saying that all options remain on the table, including military action. Greenland and Denmark have requested an urgent meeting with the U.S. to make their positions clear.
The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen looking visibly uneasy as she arrived to a meeting of European leaders on Ukraine. Another pressing issue was on her mind: getting firm support to push back against Donald Trump's Arctic ambitions. European leaders later issued a joint statement. Greenland belongs to its people. It's for Denmark and Greenland, and them only, to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. The strongest words came from the Spanish Prime Minister.
As a country, Spain, which believes in peace, diplomacy, and in the UN Charter, we cannot accept this. Nor can we accept that the territorial integrity of a European state such as Denmark can be threatened. We cannot accept it, and we will not.
It might be the world's biggest island, 6 times the size of Germany, but it knows it's a small player in a bigger geopolitical game. And the issue of Greenland's future has resurfaced in the wake of the US's attack on Venezuela. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen is calling for a respectful dialogue. Denmark and Greenland had long been close allies of the United States. At the height of the Cold War, America operated around 15 military bases and stationed 10,000 soldiers there. A presence later scaled down to only 1 base and just 200 troops. Many in Greenland are in disbelief and confused about the situation.
The last couple of days have been very emotionally turbulent, where you feel worried and think about our future. And a lot of thoughts start running through your mind.
I don't want to be American. I'm Greenlandic with a connection to Denmark, and that's fine.
I think the support for Greenland is much bigger in the world than you may pick up here on the street. And the dislike of Trump is much bigger than what you see.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has warned NATO could break apart if Trump turns his words into action. The real question for Denmark and Greenland is whether their European allies will step up to defend their sovereignty if that moment comes.
And for more on that, let's bring in Tyson Barker. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Berlin. That's a nonpartisan American think tank. Tyson, it's good to see you. Let's pick up on the last question in that piece. Will European allies step up? What options do Europe and Denmark even have if the U.S. moves on Greenland?
Well, right now, the primary option, of course, is diplomacy. I mean, the United States and Europe are bound together in a net of treaty obligations, including a bilateral security treaty between Denmark and the United States. And they need to intensify engagement because clearly the United States is increasing its bellicose rhetoric in the wake of what has happened in Venezuela. I think that's the primary tool that they have in the toolbox right now is intensive diplomacy.
Trump, meantime, he is insisting that Greenland is vital for U.S. national security, but the U.S. has had a military base and presence in Greenland since World War II, since the end of World War II. Do we know how much more he wants?
It's hard to understand the Trump administration's rationale and logic behind their claims to Greenland. Everything that they have said that they need in order to secure American security, including basing rights, they essentially already have. As you mentioned, Greenland is essentially covered under NATO. They have basing rights since the end of the Second World War. It just seems to be more part of the logic of this kind of neo-Monroe doctrine doctrine that was outlined in the National Security Strategy released last month, and that the administration seems to be operationalizing most recently in Venezuela.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump's preferred option is to buy Greenland. How could that even work?
Well, obviously, there's precedent for the purchase of a territory. The United States has several times in its history expanded by purchase, most largely the Louisiana Purchase. A large swath of core American territory was purchased from France in the early 19th century, and then Alaska from Russia during the 1860s. So there is precedent there, and the Trump administration does like to draw on precedents to justify its current actions. But, those were willing purchases. That was not done. And, it was done in a different time, an era where those kind of land acquisitions were much more common. We're in a time, ostensibly, of a rules-based international order where territorial integrity and sovereignty are inviolable. And that's just not something that occurs as often today. But there is precedent there.
The White House has said that military force is also an option. Do you think that we could see an outright annexation? And how would that resonate in the U.S., especially with Trump's MAGA base?
I mean, that's one of the big questions, is to see how, for example, its recent actions in Venezuela, its actions in Nigeria and elsewhere, this much more interventionist, much more unilateralist foreign policy is going to play with this core base, because the MAGA base is essentially, and that's been articulated by some of its biggest champions, much more isolationist, much more interested in investment at home. That's what America First is about. It's about, withdrawing any kind of expenditure of American wealth and resources abroad and investing it more at home, and kind of making the United States a fortress America. And we're still in the fallout from this weekend's events. So it's unclear how the MAGA base will completely, but it's clear that there's going to be divergence within his core constituencies.
Tyson, the Danish prime minister has warned that, any move on Greenland would mean the end of NATO. What sort of scenario planning do you think is going on right now behind the scenes?
Especially in the wake of recent events, I think that that the leaders in Europe, the European NATO leaders in Canada, are planning for all possible scenarios. The one that they're going to be most visible on is the diplomatic angle, because they want to show Greenlanders, Americans, and Europeans that they are pursuing de-escalatory engagement. But they have to think about, how do you increase troop presence? How do you make sure that the will of the Greenlandic people and the rule of law is preserved in this scenario? And that could include anything, including, some kind of defense options that engage non-American NATO members.
Tyson Barker from the Atlantic Council. Thank you, Tyson.
Thank you.